I could have really done without that, but of course Maas had to add some threat of sexual violence into this somewhere, and I'm not here for it. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kat, and this is the next part of the read-along for A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. We'll make it to chapter 19, 20 and 21 this time. In chapter 19, Feyre finally receives her paints, brushes, canvases and a room where she can paint. She does that for days or weeks on end, and occasionally goes out with Tamlin to explore the Springlands, and they seem to be quite happy in each other's company. The only time that she doesn't paint is when Tamlin goes out by himself to patrol his estate, and she gets so worried that she can't do anything until he returns safely. Which seems a bit over the top to me, but okay. Feyre has decided she cares, and then she goes all out with that, apparently. So Feyre is quite happy to just hang out and paint, although she's not showing her paintings to anybody at this point, but she does paint a lot. Until she's going around the gardens and smells something that reminds her of a family, and now she's mad at Tamlin that he made her forget about her family. He didn't make you do anything. But okay, Feyre is mad now. Tamlin finds her when she is mad. Thank you for the noise, Cleo. And she reveals why she is so angry. Her family didn't even try to stop him when he came by to take her away, despite all the things she has done for them over the years. Yeah, she's just disappointed in her family. I mean, I get it, but you don't really need to take that out on the others, and it's also not Tamlin's fault, really. But yeah, Feyre shows us a bit more of her emotions, I guess. And not just the snappy and angry parts. She rips off a rose of some bush, cuts her hand, and he kisses it better, which also instantly heals her wounds. And then he shares that he finds her really fascinating, or human beings in general, because they feel their emotions so deeply, which then in turn means that he doesn't feel as much. But so far I haven't really seen a distinction between high fae and human beings as far as emotions go. He doesn't seem disconnected. At least he seems angry and upset enough, often enough, to have that pass for human emotions, I think. And because Tamlin kisses her hand, Feyre goes from bitter and upset to horny, like in a second flat. A bit concerning, if you ask me, but I don't know, if that works for her, whatever. I didn't particularly enjoy this flip in emotions. And then he kisses her cheek, and I would have to go back a couple of chapters because I don't remember what mask exactly he is wearing. Probably not a bird, that's the servants. But either way, I imagine this mask covers quite a bit of his face, so how does he even manage kissing somebody without like poking her eye out with bits of the mask? Because I imagine like Venetian masks, and particularly for the servants, something with a beak that you probably don't want to put in somebody else's face. And in this chapter we get a scene where I can at least see how their relationship evolves, or where it might go in the future. So Feyre heads out to look at the forest. I don't think she goes far, and she also arms herself just in case. But she sets out to look at the landscape and how the light hits leaves and whatnot, and notices that somebody is following her. She sets a trap, hides in a tree, and like 20 minutes later, Tamlin is dangling off of a tree by his ankle, which, I mean, it's Looney Tune level of a scene, kind of, but it's kind of funny. And he followed her to read her all of the poems he wrote from her difficult birds. Apparently there were contests between the soldiers at the border who could write the dirtiest limerick, and we don't get to read those poems bar the first one, which is kind of eh. And also describes Feyre as like the most beautiful woman or whatever. It's like, yeah, sure, whatever. but the poems get progressively dirtier and make her blush and amuse her in the end, but we don't get to read any bar the first one, which is a shame because I would have preferred to read the dirty limericks in this. But at least in this you can see how they grow to like each other. Tamlin talks a bit about his family and how his father was a tyrant. His mother was generally nice and lovely, but not willing to stand up against his dad. His brothers were slave owners as well, and Tamlin was the only exception in the family. And everybody but Tamlin got killed by the High Lord of some enemy court. We don't get to hear which court. But that's how Tamlin ended up as High Lord, which he never really wanted in the first place. In this conversation we also learn that marriage is a thing for the High Fae, but it's different from finding your mate, which is then a bond that is far stronger than marriage, but not everybody gets to find their mate in their lifetime. On their way back, we learn that Calanmai, or Fire Night, is in 2 days' time, and there will be a lot more fairies on the grounds. So Feyre is not invited, she can't partake and should stay inside. And while they head through the gardens, Tamlin tells her to hide because something is skulking around those gardens. And once Feyre is in hiding, Lucien turns up and he and Tamlin talk to the Attor, a messenger of someone else's court. We don't know which one, but it seems to be a bodiless, scary voice that actually frightens Feyre a bit. And they are quite rude to each other, like Lucien and Tamlin and this Attor, like neither of them is polite to the other and they are taunting or threatening each other throughout the whole conversation. It's like, wow. I feel like that's not how politics should work ideally, but you know, if you're busy pissing off your neighbors, then that's what it is, I guess. Well, Feyre knows enough about this thing to know that she doesn't want to run into it, but she doesn't understand much of the conversation that they're having, and neither does the reader, I don't think. In chapter 20, Fire Night is here. Feyre has stayed inside because she's now a bit scared of the gardens until she hears the drums that go with the celebration, but Tamlin explicitly tells her you need to stay inside, you can't partake, before he sets off himself. But of course it doesn't take long for Feyre to get bored and go outside anyway, because suddenly the garden is not scary anymore, despite the fact that you should expect a lot more fairies on the grounds than before, and you never know what is coming, because what does she really know about the fairy world? She has met a couple of them, and a lot of them were either dangerous to her or generally willing to kill her, but now running outside seems like a fine thing to do. She gets a horse from the stables and sets out into the hills and to the cave where this great rite is supposed to happen. She leaves the horse bound to some tree and goes around to take a look, and remarks that she can't really see any of the people there properly. Clearly there are people from other courts as well, because not everybody is wearing a mask, but she can't really identify their features and assumes it's a glamour that has been put on her, so she can't see them properly. I'm like, how do you know it's a glamour that has been put on you? It might be them glamoring themselves up to be indistinguishable to the other people there as well. But no, Feyre knows it's magic that has been used on her, and I don't see how she knows that, but here we are. Here we get to the part that I could have really done without, because 3 fairies approach Feyre and make their advances. She very clearly is not interested, says no multiple times, and they just grab her and herd her to the forest anyway to have some fun with her. Can you show me somebody's a dick without them threatening sexual violence to the protagonist or any other character for that matter? I mean, these fairies are not important in the long run. They don't get names or whatever because somebody else turns up and chases them off. Apparently this new character, we don't have a name yet, but I have a suspicion who this is the most beautiful man Feyre has ever seen. But she also realizes that he is dangerous and she should stay away. Chapter 21, Feyre talks to the also pretty but arrogant and clearly lethal stranger for a bit, then heads back to the rite that she wants to watch. where Lucian spots her. He gets really mad, grabs her, throws her over his shoulder and runs back to the estate, so she's nowhere near this whole thing when Tamlin has to fulfill his role as the hunter. It's apparently a magical rite where he gets possessed by the hunter, has to find a female that is possessed by the maiden, then they bone, and that renews the magic of the land and makes sure that their crops actually grow and whatnot. The important part here is that while this ritual is happening, he's not himself, which is why Feyre has to stay far, far away from it. And this implies that if she was anywhere near, then he would choose her for this ritual, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I get the impression that this is a very magical event. And if this is a high fae ritual, then it should be limited to high fae as well. Because otherwise, if he could pick Feyre, then she would have to have some magic as well to validate her role in this whole thing. Lucian does warn Feyre that while Tamlin would not be himself, he would also be far less gentle than you would otherwise expect. And given how we've seen that he is a lot stronger than a human being, this could be devastating for Feyre. I mean, even when he pushes her into a wall, he could possibly snap a bone or something. Not really conducive for the boning part of this. Lucian tells her to lock herself into her room, which she actually does, but only for a couple of hours, because then she gets bored, and instead of just, like going to bed or something while the door is locked, she wanders the hallways and runs into Tamlin. I swear, it's what I said before. You tell her explicitly, do this because this and that, and she will just go off and do the opposite because she knows better. She's the protagonist. She knows better than everybody else. And since Lucian told her that this ritual also involves that plenty of other people, well, it's essentially a high fae orgy or faerie orgy. Once Tamlin has picked somebody, everybody else is free to pick somebody as well, and there will be just a whole lot of sex happening in the forest or whatever. And you would think that after nearly being sexually assaulted by those 3 fairies, maybe Lucian's hinted that she should stay away from Tamlin because he might hurt her as well, would be enough for Feyre to actually stay in the room and protect herself somewhat, but nah. What happened to the poor horse? I hope somebody collected that from the forest, because Feyre just left the poor mare there. Feyre wanders the hallways. Tamlin jumps her, pins her to a wall, and tells her that he would have picked her because he smelled her around the area where they were having this ritual, but she wasn't there, so he had to pick another woman. And Feyre gets really upset about this. It's like, oh no, he boned somebody else. Yeah, did you hear the part where he is not himself and this is a necessary ritual to keep the magic going and not have this country fall to devastation completely? But whatever. Feyre is a bit mad, but she's also incredibly horny because Tamlin bites her, and she's all like, oh my god, I can't wait to sleep with this guy. But no, wait, he just boned somebody else. No, I can't do that. Then she slaps him and he wanders off. Now there's somewhat unnecessary bit of jealousy that crops up here. For one, it's a magical ritual, it had to happen. Tamlin was not himself, which is also a bit of a contradiction because he's clearly enough of himself to figure out, oh, Feyre was here and I kind of want that woman instead of any of the others here. And then he is still enough of himself to go back while there's still, like, high magic or whatever bristling around him. He's still enough of himself to go back and tell Feyre that he actually wanted her. It's just like, can you make a decision here, Maas? Either he is himself or he isn't, but this halfway thing, just with like Lucian's motivation earlier in this book, it just makes no sense. On a related note, we already know that Tamlin is over 500 years old. So he has a lifetime, several lifetimes by human standards, of experiences behind him. Why is he interested in Feyre? Is this literally just the exotic bit that we heard about earlier? It's like, oh, you feel your emotions so deeply. We have no real evidence that high fae don't feel the emotions just as deeply as human beings. None that I've seen anyway. And it's just creepy. A person with so much life experience being interested in a teenager who doesn't even really know her place in life yet is just creepy. I'm sorry. I mean, I love Buffy and Angel as well, but it is creepy there too. Why is this guy with hundreds of years of life interested in a teenager? It's icky. Now, if Tamlin was interested in immortal in general, then that's fine, but I would expect this person at least to be a grown-up who knows his or her place in life, not just this random teenager who has no clue. I think we managed to get to the parts that Maas actually wanted to write, which is the sexual tension between Tamlin and Feyre, and God, I hope they get to boning soon and I don't have to read more of the unnecessary jealousy and holding back because for some reason you can't or whatever. Not that I'm suddenly okay with this relationship, because I still think that's off, but it's going to happen anyway, so, you know, can we at least cut the bits to get there shorter? I doubt we will, because there are many pages left in this book, and I don't bank on politics taking up much of that. Can't say I enjoyed those last 3 chapters all that much. A bit of the world building where they have their magical rituals, like, yeah, okay, I mean, it devolves into an orgy, but whatever, you do you. If that works for the high fae or faeries, go do it. That part at least was mildly interesting, but then Feyre's behavior once again just ticks me off, because she has shown like hints of promise at points, and now she's back to, oh, I'm a moody teenager, I need to take my emotions out on everything and everybody, and she has no regard for what people tell her, including her own safety. So not a relationship I will ever get behind, I expect. And I also have an assumption as to who this also pretty stranger in the woods is, because I heard spoilers for the next book, so I imagine that's him. Yeah, I guess Feyre has a type then. Very pretty, lethal, and with a hint of arrogance. But whatever. Thank you guys so much for watching me complain about this. There will be more complaining to come, I expect. Like and subscribe if you want to help this channel out. And do let me know in the comments what you make of a relationship between a 19-year-old and a dude who is over 500 years old. Thanks for stopping by. Bye, guys. No, Cleo. I need to check something first, and then you should be in the picture.